This is Reviving Artists, where we are aiming to revive artists as they revive us. This interview is with Kathryn Thomson, who's our featured artist for August 2021. I hope you enjoy. So, hello. It's very nice
Hi.
to have you on Zoom with us today for this recording. So, just to start off, could you tell us a bit about yourself? What's your name? Where are you from? What do you do?
So my name's Kathryn, otherwise known as Kathryn the Poet. I live in Glasgow. I'm originally from a town called Pennycook, which is in the Lothian. And I do a number of things. Obviously, poetry and writing is one of the things that I do, and probably the thing that I'm most passionate about. But I also work for a charity doing communications. I'm also a qualified massage therapist. So, take what you get.
Lovely. So, we can maybe put a link to massage therapy as well on the website. Uh, and I'm sure people can get a generous discount if they phone in to say they've looked at reviving artists. Aside from massage therapy, as an artist, what are the mediums that you normally work in, and is there anything that draws you to those in particular?
So I usually work with words as a poet, though I do sometimes like dabble in some more kind of like um, creative, like illustration or drawing and things like that. But I'm definitely drawn to words and writing. I think that's always been how I've understood the world best and how I've been able to express myself best. I started writing poems when I was about 14 years old, but I don't think I realized they were poems at the time because it was just like things that I wrote on bits of paper and stuck on my bedroom wall. But and it just like helped me make sense of the world. But that was always what drew me to words, is that it helped me to kind of like understand it better in a way.
Great, and that's interesting that your poetry or your understanding of yourself as a poet sort of grew in that organic way. So so that makes me want to ask, what for you would be a poem if you were defining a poem? Is it a small bit of text written on the wall of a 14-year-old? Is it a sonnet? Is it a haiku? Does it lie in the structure of the words or something else?
I think I think it's very difficult to define. I think it's kind of like saying what makes a picture a picture. Um, but I think for me, a poem is an expression of something. And I think that the things that I focus on in my poetry are the technique and the words and the sounds of it all. But I think also the idea is really important, that it needs to be a, like a deep or some sort of idea that is kind of bigger than yourself. I think is often what is in poems, or what I I seek to put in my poetry. So I think for me it's a combination of like the idea behind it and the words and the structure of it. But I write in what poets call free verse a lot. So I don't really abide by the rules. So I'm probably a terrible poet to ask that question to. But for me, a poem is expression in words, and like a shorter form of words rather than longer text.
And there's something in the themes that you're tackling that are perhaps more directly or explicitly profound, I might say.
Yeah, I think that's what it's what I try to do. I think because, like I said, poetry and words, they help me understand the world in a different way. And I think that's maybe why I write, because I want to understand these deeper things more. And if it helps someone else understand something for them that might be completely unrelated to whatever I was seeking, that's amazing, and that's the beauty of art.
Amazing. That's great. And so, thinking about yourself as a poet and sort of what we might call your process, will you come and write something down and then visit that again over a course of several edits, or is it something that will emerge more quickly after a long period of reflection?
I think, to be honest, it's a bit of both. I think I need to kind of have the idea maybe needs to be like percolating in my brain for a wee while before I'm able to kind of get it on paper. If it's something that is, I don't know, sometimes it's just like ideas keep on coming to my brain, or I keep on being reminded of an image, and that can happen like a few times over a few weeks. And then at some point, I'll finally put it to paper. So that I think there is a part of me that the idea kind of needs to grow to kind of want to be let out onto the page. But I think also I do a lot of redrafts. I find that very healthy. I don't often not redraft something, because I don't find that, I find just kind of like going back and checking what I've done, and seeing what past Kathryn wrote and being like, is that really what I want to, is that the best way to phrase that or something? I often find that when I first write things down, because it's quite fast, one, it's not very legible. Two, I often spell things wrong, like really, really obvious words I spell wrong. So I definitely need like an edit or two to smooth those things out.
Well, I think that's a big reassurance from any artists who might want to be doing any sort of creative writing who are engaging with this project, that spelling and handwriting and all those things are no bars to getting your words out and
Yeah.
articulating yourself the way you want.
And I think like for me, it's always been important to understand that the first draft, that's just for me. Like that's not for anyone else. I don't need this to be like tidy. I don't need it to be understandable. It's just getting it out and having that freedom of being like, I'm just going to write this thing and maybe I won't do anything else with it, but I just need to write it and then I'll see what happens.
That's great. And when you are having ideas, would you say that ideas or inspiration you can often see where they've come from in life, or are they things that appear slightly more randomly, say in your head?
Um, I think they have usually come from my life experiences. Um, and I think I see the world through metaphors a lot. And so sometimes it's just like something will happen, or I'll notice something often in the natural world or in the way that something moves, or I don't know, like the ocean, like moving, the tide coming in. And that kind of makes me realize something about the way that life works. And so it's usually to do with whatever's going on in my life that my inspiration comes from.
Mm. And I think people who've been able to engage with the poems that you've written for this project before watching this video will really see that, the way that the very real world practical process of redecorating grew and expanded into these metaphors. And so thinking about the project and thinking about reviving artists, um, if at the end of going through this process you had to give a definition of reviving or revival that's not necessarily a dictionary definition, but that's most true for you, what might you say?
I think I'd say that it is the process of making something new. In its simplest form, I think that's what I'd say. But I think for me, it an understanding of revival is also an understanding of the importance of being able to let something go while also welcome something new. And it's that kind of like cyclical, I need to let go of this thing to make room for this new thing and then be alive in a different way.
Mm-hmm. And alive in a different way is very interesting because that carries connotations of not just returning to what was. So rather than say the revival of an old building that's just been cleaned necessarily, there's very much something new in there.
Yeah. And I think for me, when I've experienced like just kind of personal revivals, you might call them, just of like my understanding of self or the world or life and death, when I've had those, revivals in my life. Like you can't go on the same way. It's different. Like you it's like it's like your body's changed, or and you have a separate limb or something, and it's like you can't actually function in the world in the same way anymore. You need to like change how you are because it's changed you.
Yeah. And so, over the process of being involved in this project, from when we started thinking about revival, all the way through to producing these finished poems, has the way that you've thought about reviving or revival shifted at all?
um I don't know that it's changed, but it's definitely allowed me to unpack it in a deeper way. And I think and we'll probably cover this in a later question, but um I definitely did feel like kind of there seems to be a kind of like attitude about revival. I'm like, yeah, I'd love like some revival of this bad like habit or attitude that I have in my life. And I, it sounds good, but the process can be hard. And I think I really wanted to like stretch that out in my poems, that it isn't just like a bear. It's like oh no, this is like a deep, a hard process that's probably going to take time, and it's going to be really uncomfortable sometimes. Like most of the time. I can't speak for everyone's experience of revival, but for me, when I've had like great epiphanies of my life and understanding, it takes a while to get there and it feels uncomfortable. And I think that I was just more or I was very aware that that was something that I wanted to convey, that it isn't just like a like easy switch that you flick and things are all better, but it's like doing the really important work that allows you to live in a new way.
Yeah, and I think this quite laborious, tough, the three-phase process that you've imagined for us really helps capture that in a really useful way to help us think about this revival that isn't a snap of the fingers, isn't a sudden shift. And so thinking about the work itself, just segueing into the poems, I just wanted to ask to start with, what is your favourite type of wall?
I mean, I can definitely say I've never been asked that question before. Um, I mean, I love a good bare brick wall. Honestly, I think uh, I don't know. They're probably terrible for actually like having in your house, because they're probably not very like they probably don't keep the heating very well, and rubbish you're going to do any DIY. But I think they look pretty cool, honestly.
So a nice sort of Manhattan style feature wall, maybe with some nice
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
future house.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've always wanted to live in New York, just for the bare bricks, nothing else.
Amazing. If anyone has any DIY tips or Pinterest boards for Kathryn, send them into Cornerstone or Reviving Artists, and I'll be sure to pass them on. Um, so in the poems, in phase one, there's perhaps a sense of beginning to rediscover or uncover more fundamental things about yourself. So what parts of us thought to be put at rest, as you've written it? Um, Parts of us thought to be put at rest. Which of those do you think that we all might discover in the processes of our own personal revivals?
I think that there's maybe things that we think that we've dealt with, and that are kind of like I'm really stubborn, and I always get to a point where I'm like, oh no, I'm good now. Like I don't have my stubborn tendencies anymore. And I'm like, cool, I put that in a box. I don't need to. That's not a thing that I come up against anymore. But then when I'm stressed, or just when life happens, I get a bit stubborn. And I think that there are things that we think that we don't have to be um dealing with anymore. Like we think that we've maybe like done that, tick that off the box of self-development, and we don't need to like work on that part of ourselves. But I think that revival often like kicks up all the dust, and we're not necessarily in control of what it kicks up. And sometimes it is a discovery of all these things that we didn't realize we were holding on to of ourselves that we are.
So absolutely, and then and you go on to picture the process maybe of dealing with some of those or coming to terms at least with some of those, and that's kind of in phase two, and you picture part of that process as something that's quite abrasive or maybe laborious or even intensive, I suppose. So, is there anything that led you to use that imagery in particular? Perhaps any experiences?
So I actually did redo my bedroom last in 2020, and like when we were kind of just coming out of the lockdown, the first lockdown. But and it was properly like this is the first home I've owned, and it was probably like steaming off all the wallpaper and sanding down all the walls and like washing them and layers and layers of paint on them. And it's a long process. It's not quick or easy. And I think I was just thinking about that a lot, and how, when we are in this kind of like in the flux of revival, and we are like realizing new things about ourselves that we maybe need to let go of, or making room for new, that is uncomfortable. And you can't just be like, oh yeah, no, that's fine, it's done. I know that thing about myself. It's like, no, you really need to like know it and learn how to live with it or something. And I think that I enjoyed the idea of this intense abrasive process, because I think when we are coming to terms with parts of ourselves, or feel like we're growing in a spiritual way, that feels difficult. I think a lot of the time that doesn't feel like comfortable and easy.
Mm.
That feels challenging, in my experience. And I think this image helped me to understand that in a new way, that it does feel like you're being worn down. And I think when you feel like you're being worn down, you're like, this is horrible. Why is this happening? But it needs to be worn down to put something new, something fresh, something that allows room for more
Mm.
on it.
And is it fair to draw on the metaphor that you've introduced for us by saying that perhaps environments, let's say rooms, that we feel comfortable with but are looking shabby, can be difficult to get rid of because we're used to them, we're comfortable with them, and so the process of stripping back all that we felt comfortable with is tough.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things that I really liked about this kind of like idea of the metaphor of the DIY is that, um if you look at a room that looks terrible and you're like, I need to redo this, often it's like, how do I start? Like it's too much almost. And I think that's how it can feel if we know that we need to change something, or we know that something new is kind of like starting within us, but we don't know the practical steps. But there are always like small steps to take that'll get us to the other side. And sometimes it takes a lot longer than we think it will. It did take a lot longer than I thought it would to redecorate my room. I can confirm that. But yeah, so I think that it can feel overwhelming to begin with. And I think I do say something about, in the first poem, I say in one of the stanzas, at first it will feel impossible, so you put it off for another day. And I think that's it. A lot of the time, it's like, this is, I don't know where to start. This is too much. I'll some other day. But it doesn't necessarily stop the process happening by putting it off. The room still starts to fall apart.
Yeah. And speaking of the process of reviving the room, of personal revival, in phase three, especially, you suggest that the revivifying of this room, the revival, might finish without ending at all. I think that's the phrase you use. So, in that case, is reviving something that's cyclical or something that's just a continuous progression?
Yeah, I think it's cyclical. I think we're always in a state of revival. We're just at different points in it. I think sometimes we'll maybe just be like near the end, so we'll feel quite comfortable in it, and or like just at the beginning. I think we know when we're in the middle. I think that's usually quite apparent, but I think it is a kind of like it's an ebb and flow of all we are. We are in it at some stage for something all the time,
Yeah.
in my humble opinion.
No, absolutely. And you just mentioned there, uh, you talked about how this is true of spiritual revival, this sort of process as well for you. And we're interested here at Reviving Artists about the way that people's faith story, faith journey, faith understandings are influencing their work in direct or indirect ways. So I just wanted to ask just briefly, what is your faith journey? And where are you
So
on that
I
cycle, if you like?
um that's a good question as to where I'm at in the cycle. I guess for the journey, I grew up in a family that went to church. So that was always kind of part of the woodwork of my family life. And then when I went away to uni, I kept going to church and um found a good like community where I was at, and I was quite part of the Christian Union and things like that. But when I left uni, I think there was a lot going on for me, and it finding my faith without the context of having those communities was really beneficial for me, for like learning what it meant for me and what my relationship with God looked like and how I understood God to be. Um, so yeah, and now I'm part of a small community church that is quite like focused in the local area that I'm in, which is very aligned with my values currently. So yeah, I think it's I mean it's always been a journey, but there's definitely been lots of like revivals within that of me understanding things one way and then realizing that that's not how I understand it anymore, and constantly kind of like uh, just like thinking or like critiquing like why where I'm at in it and why I think about something, and yeah, just kind of being in that constant conversation with it. I think where I'm at in revival right now is I think recently I've probably had until maybe the beginning of 2020 I was maybe in like in the middle of revival for probably like 2 years. Um, and so I think I'm kind of like at the end of that now because it's felt a bit more stable the last like year and a half. But yeah, that just means it's going to start again soon. So that'll be fun.
um, that's wonderful. Thank you. I suppose that makes me want to ask, in terms of this overarching metaphor we're discussing, in these moments of more spiritual revival, in terms of your faith, are you the room that's being worked on by God, let's say, or are you being helped to work on a room, or is it something else?
I think I feel like um it's maybe like part of me is the room that's being worked on because I don't think the room is the whole me, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like the house or the world is the whole me or whatever. But the room is like a part of me that isn't working so well.
Mm-hmm.
Like the insulation is terrible and the wiring's a bit dodgy, and it's just not really functioning as it should. Um, so I think that's kind of how I understand it, and I think I see it as kind of like a team work situation. I
Mm-hmm.
think we need to be part of the revival for it to have deep impact,
Mm-hmm.
but we aren't the only factor in it happening.
Yeah, thank you. And on that, you've just talked about there about faith, and faith is some of the, let's say, some of the more fundamental things that shape your worldview, some of the fundamental things that you believe to be true or you hold to be true. And you talk about the phrase you use, I think it's in phase two, is the rough texture of truth wearing you down, which I love as a phrase, the rough texture of truth wearing you down. So does that relate to your own relationship with what you believe to be true, or is that a phrase or metaphor that comes from a different place?
Um, I think, I think it's not an exaggeration to say that in the last year and a half, we've all been exposed to truths that we weren't that comfortable with. And so like both just like for me personally on like a spiritual level, but also just like the way that we've seen the world act and react to various scenarios has been hard, and difficult to hold. And the phrase "the truth hurts," I don't think it's an exaggeration, or like it's a bit cliched, but I think it can really hurt. And it also means that it's maybe the most powerful thing a lot of the time. So I think it came from both just kind of like listening to everything that has happened in the last like year and a half, but also being aware that sometimes when someone is honest with us, or when we're honest with ourselves, or when we're just kind of like willing to hear the truth from God, or from the way that we're experiencing the world, that is often the most powerful thing.
Thank you very much. And on that note, in terms of some of the hard truths that the pandemic brought up as well, I just wanted to ask more generally, how has the pandemic affected you?
It's been okay. I think I I don't remember feeling like super stressed in it. But I did make myself quite busy, and I started these pandemic poems that I like posted. I made an Etsy page, and I made this product where I had like 3 series of 5 poems that I hand wrote and hand painted, every single one of them, um, which I don't regret, but it was tiring. um, and so I in the beginning I kept myself very busy with that, and I wanted to share something that was hopeful with people, and I also wanted to connect people with something more. So I think in the beginning I was like firing up for that. But I think there's been ups and downs and all of it, just like in life. But I think maybe I've experienced things like more intensely, like when I've been frustrated or angry with something, it's more difficult to let that go. Or when I've been sad about something, it's more difficult to shake it off. And I think because in my experience anyway, it's like I'm working from home all the time, and I don't have the routine of going to different places to kind of like get rid of all the experiences or feelings that I'm having in this like one place. So I think sometimes it's been more difficult to just kind of like let go of things. But creatively, I would say that, like I said in the beginning, it was good. But as things have gone on, because I've been working at home all the time, it's been quite difficult to have that creative space, because my job is also in the same place that I would write, and it's different parts of my brain and different frames of mind that I would use for both of those things.
Mhm. And having all them all compressed into the one room is difficult.
Yeah, yeah.
I say this interviewing you from my own room, which has been my mm, pandemic hub, so I understand a little bit of that. Um, and so at Reviving Artists with this project, we are interested in how art revives us, and I certainly believe that these poems and all the rest of the work that's going to happen is is going to help point people upwards, or help them think about revival at least. But we're also recognizing that, as you've just described, the past, what, maybe 18 months. Beyond that has been difficult for artists. And so, what can people who are listening to this do to support artists in general and yourself in particular?
I think, I mean, in this day and age, social media and the internet is kind of how anyone hears about anything. So I would say, like, just sharing someone's work on a social media channel or like commenting or something like that is always appreciated by um, small artists, because that just creates like a lot more traction that they would have otherwise. But I think anything more is just like, if you can support them financially, as in like buy their products or whatever, then um that's a big deal for like local artists have who have been trying to rely on that.
Great. So you heard it here, everyone. Share and donate. Kathryn, yourself, where can people find your work if they want to learn more about yourself?
So I'm mainly on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, but more Instagram under Kathryn the Poet. I also send out a monthly newsletter, which hasn't really been monthly for the last year. So, but you can also subscribe to that, and you receive a wee poem and a wee thought from me every month or so. Yeah, those are the places that I usually hang out.
Okay. Well, that wraps up our interview for today. So, Kathryn, thank you very much for all your involvement in this project and especially for the pieces you've created. Hope it's been an enjoyable project for you. Certainly, it's been great to hear about how it's helped you uh, think through revival and for yourself. And I hope it will for everyone who comes to interact with the page. You can find more details above. And find more details about Kathryn lower down on the page, and you can scroll through all the artists who are coming up as the months go on. So thank you very much, Kathryn.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks for taking the time to watch that interview. If you've not yet had the chance to look at Kathryn's work, you can find it above, you can read the poems, and there's also a video where Kathryn herself is reading them out. And if you're interested in finding out more about Kathryn, there's more information below, including links to her social media. And if you'd like to donate to Reviving Artists, there's also a link to do that. When you are donating, please specify Reviving Artists so we can make sure that the money goes to artists in the future, as well as 20% which is going to International Justice Mission. Also, please consider sharing the project on your social media, and if you're a praying person, praying for the project as well. Thank you so much.